Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Bishop and Warrior Christmas by Teresa Gabelman, narrated by Jeffrey Kafer. A Warrior Christmas. Chapter 1. Jared followed Damon and Sid into the compound, shaking snow out of his hair and kicking it off his boots. Why in the hell couldn't Sloan set up base in fucking Florida? He grumbled, his eyes narrowing at the snow they were trekking in as if he could melt it with his glare. "I like it," Damon announced, his voice as hard as his eyes. If you say pretty, I swear I will beat your ass right where you stand." Sid used his hand to brush out his blonde surfer boy hair. Jared glanced at Damon with a smirk and knew it was coming. Pretty. There was nothing pretty in the way Damon said the word. At over 6 foot, he stood both menacing and rigid, waiting to see if Sid made good on his promise of beating his ass. As they waited to see what Sid would do, the door opened, sending a flurry of Damon's pretty snow inside. Steve walked by and paused, staring at the white stuff. "Damn, looks like a blizzard out there," Steve said, then sighed. "Isn't it pretty?" Not realizing what he could possibly be causing, Steve continued on his way and disappeared. Damon cocked his eyebrow at Sid, who let loose with a string of curses. Jared chuckled, slamming the door behind him. Jesus, it was going to be a long winter. Nicole and Tessa came out of Sloane's office. "Well, you all made a mess. Sloane!" Nicole frowned at the wet floor as she called out to Sloane. "We need rugs out here for the guys to kick off the snow." Jared heard Sloane's mumbled curses, then winked at Tessa, who smiled up at him. Damn, he hated himself for putting her through so much shit because of his past. He was a bastard who would spend the rest of their lives making it up to her. "How was your day?" Tessa stepped into his arms and peered up at him. Leaning down, he kissed her softly before answering. "Cold, wet, with a lot of bitching from Sid." Sloane walked to his door and looked out. "Get your asses in here." Jared looked away from Sloane to see Nicole and Tessa share a look. "What'd you two do now?" "Nothing." Tessa tried to sound innocent, but she failed miserably. She rolled her eyes before giving him a light kiss on the cheek. "He's just being a Grinch. Now go on, and I'll meet you in the game room." Jared watched her go, then glanced as Nicole passed, mouthing, "Sorry," and then chuckled. Shit. What in the hell did they do to put Sloane in a mood? Not that it would take much. With a loud sigh, he headed that way. Behind his desk, Sloane sat and glared down at it. Seeing Becky, Jared gave her a grin, which she returned before giving Sloane a narrowed look. "You want me to stay or leave, Sloane?" Becky's voice wasn't pleasant. Slowly, Sloane's gaze rose toward her, and Jared wished to hell he was anywhere other than inside that room. He heard Damon's whispered, "Shit," as Sid pushed the chair in front of Sloane's desk back just a little bit, the legs making a sound on the floor as he did. "Do what you want, Becky." Sloane growled the words, his eyes narrowing to match hers. Becky jerked to her feet, grabbed a handful of files, stomped toward Sloane's desk and tossed them. "I wouldn't want you to feel you needed to filter your words because I'm here." Never had he known Sloane to filter shit, no matter who was within earshot. Mother Teresa could be standing in front of his desk, and Sloane would say what was on his mind without a second thought. Yeah, something big was up, and he had a feeling the mates were behind it again. "Honey, my words are never filtered." Sloane slowly stood, both hands on his desk. "Stay or go. It's your call." "You're being a total asshole." Becky put both hands on his desk and leaned toward him eye to eye. "I don't do filter either." Jared, Sid, and Damon all looked at each other, not knowing where else to look. Damn, this was uncomfortable. Seeing Becky, who barely came to Sloane's chest, standing up to him, challenging him, was a little unsettling. Becky was the first to push away from the desk. She turned from him, her head held high as she moved toward the door. "Have a good day, boys," she said. Each of them mumbled a reply. After the door slammed behind her, Sloane continued to stare at it before his angry gaze landed on them. "Get a receptionist," they said. "It'll help," they said. Sloane slammed his hand on the desk before sitting down. "Your mates are gonna drive me fucking sane." Narrowing his eyes, Jared glanced at the door, then back at Sloane. Before he could say anything, Sid spoke up. I don't see my mate anywhere," Sid replied with a cocked eyebrow. "Actually, I think that was your mate who just gave you what for and slammed out the room." You seriously think you have to remind me of that since it just fucking happened? Sloane's voice grew to a roar. I have rogue vampires coming out of my ass. Jared glanced at Sid and knew he wanted to make a smart-ass comment, but somehow Sid held back. As well as witches, demons, and not to mention the fucking humans calling all hours of the night and day with, I saw a shadow and I'm scared bullshit. And that's our mate's fault? Damon finally spoke up, his arms crossed as he leaned against his favorite spot in Sloane's office. Jared wondered if there was an indent of Damon's shoulder in that very spot. Yes, damn it, Sloane roared. It is. You know what your mate and your mate were in my office for. He pointed first at Damon and then Jared. Jared noticed Sid glance his way, waiting to see what he would say. Jared thought about being a funny guy, then decided against it. Yet his mouth had other fucking plans. For your upbeat and tantalizing conversation? Sloane's head turned toward him, so quick his eyes blazing red. I swear I will kill you in the most brutal of ways, Kincaid. Yeah, okay, maybe fucking with Sloane right now wasn't the smartest thing to do. The voice he just heard coming out the boss man's mouth was evil, with a promise that Sloane Murphy could possibly pull off. Jared decided to remain quiet, for the moment. Feeling a sense of relief when Sloane's attention turned toward Damon, Jared shook his head at Sid, who grinned from ear to ear. 8 years, Demasters. Sloane's fangs gleamed. 8 years of what? Damon asked calmly, as if discussing the weather. 8 long fucking years, and this is the year your mate is gonna start with this Christmas bullshit. Sloane pushed back from his desk, irritated. Sloane, my man? Sid eyed him. There's been Christmas every year that I've been here, with the tree and all the trimmings and shit. You losing it on us? Need me to call Slade? Sloane looked as if he was going to jump over the desk and strangle the life out of Sid, but he refrained, and by the looks of his bulging arms, it was taking some strength mentally and physically not to kill Sid. Instead, he ran his hand through his hair and cursed. A tree, a few presents, but this is going to throw everything into chaos, and that's something we can't afford to do right now. Jared was actually tiring of watching Sloane sweat. Most days he enjoyed watching the boss man jittery, but today he just wanted to spend time with his mate, who right now was waiting on him. They had a lot of time to make up for, and time wasn't exactly on his side. Just spit it out, man. Jared jumped in head first. What in the hell has you all fired up? They want to decorate the walls outside. They want you warriors to put up lights and shit. They want to party with all the neighboring warriors and to invite the whole city in. Sloane looked defeated. Men, you have to tame your women. Sid and Jared laughed loudly, with Damon laughing the loudest. Tame them. Damon chuckled, shaking his head. As soon as you tame Becky and show us how that's done, then you can let us know. I don't see the problem with it. Yeah, 'cause he thinks snow is pretty. Sid rolled his eyes, then stood. Maybe they'll change their minds. They're all busy, so I say let's just calm the fuck down. I honestly don't want our compound looking like Who-fucking-ville. I can just hear the warriors from other compounds busting our balls on that one. Yeah, I'd hate to decapitate one of our own, Damon agreed with a frown. And having strangers coming in here isn't the smartest thing. See, fuckers? Sloane threw up both hands. Now do you think I'm overreacting? I just hope you're right and the women calm down on this shit. I don't have the time or the patience to deal with this woman crap. Hey! Steve hurried in with a grin. You all ready to partay? The women are meeting in the game room, ready to get the show on the road. This is exciting stuff. After Steve rushed back out the room, all 4 men looked at each other and said, "Fuck," in unison. Chapter 2. Tessa sat in the game room, staring out the window. Daniel was outside throwing snowballs at a tree while Duncan stood watching. A giggle escaped her lips when Daniel turned quickly with the snowball he just made and plastered Duncan on the chest. Pam came out just then, laughing, but soon Duncan and Daniel ganged up on her, covering her in snowballs. With a content sigh, Tessa looked up at the night sky, watching the snowflakes fall. It was beautiful. Her eyes cast downward to see the snowball fight intensify, making her laugh. This time it was Pam and Duncan ganging up on Daniel. She knew the moment he entered the room, but she didn't turn around. She just continued to watch the mayhem below. Jared came up behind her, cocooning her, his large hands resting against the windowsill. He's getting so big, Tessa said, watching Daniel dodging snowballs. He's almost as tall as Pam. That's not saying much, Jared teased, his breath warm against the top of her head. Slade is trying to find someone out there like him so he can compare Daniel's growth. Tessa frowned. What are the chances of that? Slim, Jared replied. But we're all working on it, reaching out to our contacts. We're hoping this maturing will stop at a certain age. We just don't know. Tessa nodded, her eyes following Daniel, who suddenly looked up and waved. Waving back with a smile, she laughed when Pam threw a snowball, hitting Daniel on the side of the head. Jared laughed loudly. Daniel frowned up at him, grabbed a handful of snow, balled it, and threw it toward the window. I think that was a challenge, Jared growled with a hint of teasing. Guess I need to go show the young one how it's done. I've always wanted to throw something hard at Duncan. After a quick kiss, Jared was off to join the excitement outside, but Tessa remained at the window. Things had changed for them so quickly. Many would think she'd let Jared off too easily, and maybe she had, but that was her decision, her life. Knowing his secret past, Tessa understood why he'd done what he had, but she agreed, as did Jared, that he could have gone about things differently. Having a demon, Jozar, hunting you would make anyone nervous about who they brought into their lives. Jared was very protective, as were all the warriors. His reluctance to see Tessa succeed as a warrior was understandable, as was his reluctance to change her from human to vampire. Changing her meant she would be harder for him to leave if this demon who was out for his soul found him, and find him he would. At least that was Charger's and Jared's prediction. What shocked her most was finding out he had once been married to a woman who carried his child. And the child was now Tessa's age, give or take a year or two, who Tessa had mistakenly thought Jared was in love with. Rolling her eyes at that thought, Tessa saw Jared exit the compound, bending to roll a snowball and proceed to hit Duncan in the back of the head. Daniel ran over and gave Jared a high five, but Duncan was soon plastering them with snowballs, while Pam stood by laughing before she got one to the face. Speaking of Jared's daughter, she saw Raven's reflection in the window behind her. "Why aren't you out there?" Raven asked, walking beside her to stare out the window. Tessa laughed when Pam hit Jared in the balls with a snowball, bending him over. Both Duncan and Daniel pointed while laughing. "I haven't played in the snow for so long I'll probably get killed out there." "I think you can take him." Raven grinned as Jared darted behind trees, hitting Pam every chance he got, apparently paying her back for the ball shot. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure." Tessa looked away from the window to stare up at Raven. "Can you and I go out sometime? Just us?" Raven asked, her tone and body language uncomfortably tense. "I would love that, Raven." Tessa smiled with a nod. "Any time you want, I'm there." "Thanks," she replied, with what sounded like a sigh of relief. "How about tomorrow? I'm pretty sure I'm off." "Sounds good. Just let me know." Tessa jumped when something hit the window. Glancing down, she saw Jared grinning at them, then spread his arms out wide in a taunting manner. "I think he's challenging us." Raven's eyes narrowed as a grin tipped her lips. "And I never back down from a challenge. You?" "Never," Tessa replied, then pushed away from the window. "How about we team up?" "My thoughts exactly," Raven agreed as they headed outside. "Hey, where are you guys going?" Jill asked as she passed them on their way out of the game room. "Yeah, I thought we were meeting here for a Christmas party. I've got some good ideas." Steve sounded disappointed as he looked around. "Where is everyone?" "Will you please stop calling it a party? It's a party." Jill rolled her eyes, keeping her attention on Tessa and Raven. "So what's up?" "We're going down to take Jared out in a snowball fight," Raven said with determination. "Care to join us?" "Oh, hell yeah." Jill rubbed her hands together. "Steve?" Tessa asked as they started to head out. "Don't make me choose sides, man." Steve shook his head. "I'm already catching shit because I'm on your side with Christmas party. I'd like to live past the New Year." "Oh, stop being a puss," Jill said as they, instead of heading out the back, headed out the front to do a sneak attack. "Grow some balls." "Growing them ain't the problem," Steve snorted, then reached down and took a handful of snow. "Keeping them is." Tessa chuckled, then swooped some snow. It was good packing snow, perfect for snowballs. Peeking around the corner of the compound, she spotted Jared with his back to them as he hid behind a tree dodging snowballs. She glanced at Jill and Raven, and they gave her a nod. If they got too close, Jared would sense them. He was a warrior, after all. With a smile, she waited until he turned around surprised, then she let her ball loose. It sailed perfectly into his handsome face. "Oh, you're going to pay for that," Jared growled, his eyes narrowing at her. He let loose of what he was holding, hitting Raven as he took off for Tessa. She screamed as she backpedaled, then turned to run. She heard Steve saying it was all their idea. The coward. She knew Jared was close, could hear his feet pounding behind her, and then his arms circled her as she fell. At the last moment he turned, taking the force of the fall on his back. Just as quickly he rolled so he was on top, staring down into her face. "Steve told me to do it," she lied, a small smile lifting her lips. "Did he now?" Jared cocked his eyebrow at her. "I don't believe that for a second, Tessa." He grabbed her wrists in one hand and held them over her head. With his other, he snatched a handful of snow, a sexy, evil grin forming across his lips. "Don't you dare," Tessa warned, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, I dare." Jared made sure a few flakes fell on her face. "I'm just trying to decide where to put it." Before Tessa could answer, snow exploded from the back of Jared's head. He turned to look, giving Tessa the opportunity to buck him off and scramble to her feet. Raven stood behind them with a huge grin. "Damn, that felt good." Raven laughed, then dodged the snowball that came toward her from Jared. "Is that all you got, old man?" "Old man," Jared growled, bending down to get more snow. "I'll show you, old man." Tessa watched as Jared took off after Raven, a grin on her face. Flakes fell from the sky. Glancing up, she sighed wistfully. It was snowing again. While she wasn't a fan, tonight she was, as it gave her a glimpse of the Jared Kincaid she hadn't seen in such a long time. "What are you doing just standing there?" Nicole shouted, waving at her to come on. "It's a full-out war back here. We need you." Tessa took off running and was surprised to see the warriors and the mates having one hell of a snowball fight. It was total chaos, but it felt right. For once they all let their guard down, if only for a few minutes to enjoy the moment. Tessa had a feeling the time for peace was going to change, and soon. Her smile slipped as she glanced at Daniel, who stood still just watching everyone. Then his eyes met hers. She realized immediately that Daniel also knew this carefree moment was fleeting. Chapter 3. Steve unlocked the warehouse door and walked inside, locking it behind him. He had just left the mayhem of snowballs. It was fun for a moment, but then he tired of it quickly. Everyone still saw him as Steve the goof-ass, but something inside him had changed. He didn't like it. No one seemed to notice, even Mira, yet to him, the day they'd pulled him down from the front gate of the compound, he'd lost part of himself. Not even bothering with a light, Steve tossed his bag to the floor, kicked off his boots, and walked onto the mat. Only recently had Slade given him the go-ahead to train. Whatever the witches had done to him caused him to heal much slower. Mira, Kira, and even Bonnie couldn't figure out why or what kind of spell they had used. He was a vampire. No spell should have worked. Then again, he had been a half-breed and still had human traits. He had even scarred in places, not healing completely. His eyes narrowed at the mirrors across the floor as he headed that way, taking off his shirt. A stranger's eyes stared back at him as they dropped to his chest. The remnants of scars could still be seen. Hatred and rage filled him, aimed at the bastard Orjyll. The fucker may not have been the one to exact the punishment his body suffered, but he was definitely the one giving the orders. The pain wasn't even the worst of what had happened to him. Pain he could tolerate. Yeah, it sucked and he'd rather not have any, but the humiliation of being found hung to the gate with a fucking message carved into his body was something he wouldn't soon get over. His peers had seen him that way, his brothers, and his mate, Mira. He'd seen the look in each of their eyes every time they'd visited him while he'd been healing, and it had eaten at him like nothing ever had before. While he hid all of it behind his Steve, funny guy facade, his rage and need for revenge were getting to him like a slow burn in his gut. It was only times like this, alone, that he could really be who he had become. His eyes rose from the scars to stare into himself. He hated what he saw. Without thinking, his fist balled tightly, punching out at his reflection. Glass shattered and the mirror broke into thousands of pieces, landing on his feet. He continued to stare, seeing only slivers of his face. His reflection was as broken as he himself was. "That's 10 years bad luck?" Bonnie's voice sounded behind him. 7. Steve corrected absently, still staring at parts of himself. "What are you doing here?" "Came to check on you, which was obviously smart on my part," Bonnie replied, then sat down in the middle of the mat. "I know what you're going through, Steve." Turning toward her, he tilted his head. "Oh, really? What is it you think I'm going through other than having to explain to Sid about this broken mirror?" When Bonnie continued to stare up at him, Steve knew he had to play his part, because no way in hell was he going to open up to a witch he barely knew. Seriously, there was a big fucking spider and I killed it. That's all you saw. You suck at lying. Bonnie gave him a half grin. So cut the shit, Steve. I've dealt with Orjyll for a long time, seen what he can do. I don't want to talk about this with you. Steve glared down at her. Bud, I'm the only one you can talk to about this, Bonnie replied, then sighed. Right now you're not too trusting of witches, and yet you're mated to one. I think you best have someone to talk to because this is going to eat you alive. Blood ran down his fingers, his hands stung, and he welcomed the pain. It numbed everything else he felt. Don't bring Mira into this. She's already in it. Bonnie tilted her head, then stood to face him. Don't let him win, Steve. Don't let him turn you into someone you're not. This is what he does. He will try to bring you all down by any means necessary. Believing that remaining silent was best at the moment, Steve continued to stare at her. He didn't want to admit she was right, but she was in some aspect. He wasn't himself. He had a taste for something that he'd never had before. To kill. It wasn't bloodlust, far from it. It was revenge, plain and simple. Everyone may think he let you go, but I know different. Bonnie took a step closer to him. She reached up and tapped him on the temple. He's right there, where he wants to be. I will kill him. Steve's voice was low and didn't even sound like his own. Hatred filled every single word. Not if I get to him first. Bonnie stepped away, dropping her arm. Frowning, she stared at him. Because I'm not part of the warrior code, can you answer something for me? She actually did the air quotes. If I can. Steve nodded, actually feeling a little better talking to Bonnie. Not much, but a little less full of hate. Do you think there were any demons involved in what happened to you? Bonnie asked, her frown deepening. Were you able to pay any attention at all? Steve answered without pause. I know exactly who was involved, who was around, and who played a part. No demons were there. You're 100% sure? Bonnie's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. They can be tricky. No demons. Steve's answer was final. And did Orjyll mention demons? She continued her questions without blinking an eye. No, Steve shook his head. I can tell you the whole conversation if you'd like, but honestly, I'd rather not. She shook her head. I wouldn't do that to you unless you needed to. I'm serious, Steve. If anyone knows about Orjyll's evilness, it's me. Anytime you need to talk, I'm here, just to listen. Steve sighed after a second of hesitation. I appreciate that, Bonnie. Steve glanced toward the warehouse door as it opened, then back at her. Thank you. No thanks needed. She gave him a half-smile. Bishop had just walked in and was turning on lights when Steve grabbed her arm before Bonnie could leave. Why did you ask me about the demons? For a moment she remained silent, her eyes shifting toward Bishop. Because I don't think they're as involved in this as the others think. Steve frowned, letting go of her arm. Have you said anything to anyone about that? Not until I'm sure. Remember, I'm not part of the warrior code. She used air quotes again, but this time rolled her eyes. He couldn't help but grin. He had felt that way once before he was a warrior. What the fuck happened to the mirror? Bishop walked up, his eyes going from the mirror to Steve's bloodied hand, then to Bonnie. Spider. Bonnie's eyes widened in fake fright. Big sucker. I was terrified, but Steve saved me. Bishop's eyes narrowed at Bonnie before glancing back at the mirror. Steve chuckled when she winked at him, then turned to leave. Spider, huh? Bishop cocked his eyebrow at him. Yeah, big sucker. Steve kept to Bonnie's story. Yeah, we'll get this shit cleaned up. Bishop walked toward the showers. Slade release you? He did. Steve headed to get a broom. Why? 'Cause I need help, so cancel your plans. Bishop disappeared, leaving Steve to clean up his mess. As he swept up the broken mirror, Steve's mind cleared somewhat. Having Bishop ordering him around seemed normal, something he hadn't felt since that day. Everyone seemed to tiptoe around him, not wanting to upset poor, broken Steve. By the time he had everything cleaned up, the room was filling up with warrior trainees. Noticing one glancing at his chest, he grabbed his shirt and put it on. That's all it took for his mood to turn dark once again. Chapter 4. Bishop actually enjoyed training, even though he did more bitching at the new trainees. They probably thought he hated them, but that was far from the truth. He respected every single one of them who walked through the door. He just knew what it took, and it wasn't a pat on the head and good job bullshit. They needed a hard lesson in the life of a VC warrior. That meant dealing with shit no one else wanted to deal with under any circumstances, and more times than not without a good job or a heartfelt thank you. Sid had asked him to take over tonight because he had to help the mates with a Christmas tree. Bishop had chuckled at that. Bunch of fucking whooped pussies was what they were. Then again, if he had a mate who looked like any of his fellow warriors' mates, he'd probably be. No, it would take more than a good-looking female to make him pant after her. Glancing toward Katrina, he frowned, focusing on her ground fighting. She was struggling against her partner's strength rather than thinking of her technique. Grappling took patience and thought. He walked her way, and he knelt beside her. "Stop fighting it, Katrina," Bishop ordered, watching as the much larger male trainee manhandled her, but not in a disrespectful way. The trainee was trying to help her. Katrina rolled her eyes at him, then went limp. "I hate grappling." She huffed, then blew hair out of her eyes. "I freak out. I'm too claustrophobic. Anytime anyone puts weight on me, I panic." "She does." The trainee nodded at Bishop. "I can feel her tense as soon as I put any pressure down on her." "Mike, isn't it?" Bishop asked. Trying to learn all their names had been the hardest part of training them. "Yes, sir." He nodded, looking pleased Bishop got his name right. "Put as much pressure on her that you can," Bishop ordered, glancing at Katrina to see how she was going to react. Yeah, she didn't like it. "Okay, when I said panic, I mean I want to gouge eyes, scratch, bite, you name it." Katrina's eyes widened in warning. "Seriously, I will do anything to get away, and that isn't grappling. That's get the hell off of me before I totally freak out." "He can handle it," Bishop nodded. "Right, Mike?" Sure." Mike didn't sound so sure. "Can't I just do something else?" Katrina sighed, looking defeated. "I'm good with stand-up." "Most fights end up on the ground." Bishop cocked his eyebrow at her. "You know that." "Then I'll just call in my coyotes," Katrina countered, looking pleased with her reply. "No." Bishop shook his head. "Okay, Mike, hold her down. Make her work to get out, or she gets you to tap." "Shit." Katrina's voice shook. Bishop lay on the ground, keeping enough distance so they could work without him in the way. Watching her face closely, he saw when she was getting ready to panic. "Why aren't you helping the mates get the Christmas shit?" "What?" Katrina huffed, her voice high-pitched as she fought to get Mike off her. "Stop trying to push him off because that's never going to happen. Relax. See his arm. Trap it against your body," Bishop ordered, watching her reach for Mike's arm but losing it when Mike pulled it away. "All the women were going to get a Christmas tree. Why didn't you go with them?" Katrina finally got Mike's arm. "Because I had training and didn't want Sid chewing me out." "Good choice," Bishop chuckled, his eyes remaining on her technique. "Good. Now trap his foot with yours." Mike put more pressure on Katrina as he fought to get his arm back, and the panic was setting in again. "Yeah, I'm not much for Christmas," Bishop said, then looked back to see her trying to get Mike's foot trapped. Once she did, he glanced back up at her. "Good. Now I know they've taught you the upa, so fucking do it. Bridge up and flip him." Being a good partner, Mike didn't make it easy on her. He slipped his foot out from her trap, making her work for it. It seemed that the panic had left her temporarily as she focused on a move she knew. "Yeah, I hate Christmas," Katrina sneered as she finally caught Mike's foot, and with a quickness that made Bishop proud, she rolled Mike onto his back where she now was on top straddling him. "Holy shit, I did it!" Bishop sat up with a smile as large as hers. "Yeah, you did. Good job." "Distraction." Katrina gave him a thoughtful nod. "It actually worked. I was wondering why you were talking about Christmas." "Kept you from thinking about smothering." Bishop grinned. "Mind over matter. Works every time." "Good job, Katrina." Mike smiled up at her, then raised his hand for a high five. "But why do you hate Christmas? Nobody hates Christmas." "Yeah, well, this girl does," Katrina replied, then glanced toward Blaze, who Bishop knew had been watching. "Don't let the mates hear you say that," Bishop warned, then stood. "Mike, make her do that 100 times and make it hard on her." "Yes, sir." Mike nodded as Katrina climbed off him. "Come on, Katrina, let's move over here where we have more room." Bishop walked over to where Blaze and Steve stood observing everyone. "I'll work with her on her grappling," Blaze stated, his eyes still on Katrina. "I didn't know she was struggling that much with it." "Most people with claustrophobia do," Bishop replied, his eyes roaming the other trainees. "Mike's a good partner for her." Blaze nodded but continued to frown as he stared at his mate. "Did she say she hated Christmas?" Steve frowned, then glanced at Bishop. "She did." Blaze was the one who answered, his voice deep as his eyes narrowed. "But why?" Steve shook his head. "No one should hate Christmas." Don't know, but I'll be finding out. Blaze moved away from the wall and headed in her direction. He peered back at Bishop. Thanks for helping her. It's my job. Bishop gave him a nod.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?